Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So today I want to talk about Li Lu, the life of Li Lu. This is a Substack article that just came out, I believe today, from Kalani Scarrott, who I've been following for a while on Twitter. And Kalani put in a ton of work, just assembling different aspects of Li Lu's life to really just share kind of an overarching summary of, the adversity that Li Lu has been through to get to where he is today, one of the greatest investors of all time. So I really appreciated this post that Kalani put out. So let's just kind of drive through it here and see what jumps out. He also put out a video on YouTube, kind of going through this article. So might just be the most interesting investor to ever live. Okay, he was born during the Cultural Revolution, where his parents got sent off to labor camps. They were considered intellectuals, and so they had to be re-educated in these labor camps. So, he was just bouncing around from family to family when he was young. Must have been incredibly difficult. These peasant families survived the Tangshan earthquake, okay? Huge earthquake in China. There were people who thought, the US had dropped an atomic bomb or something on China. That's how intense this earthquake was. And while he survived, members of the family that he was living with, most of them died. So what a thing to have to live through. And then, of course, the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989. Li Lu was one of the most wanted men in China. Okay, he had to be smuggled out of the country via Hong Kong to France. And then shortly after, he came to the US, where I think he got 3 degrees from Columbia University concurrently. I don't think that's ever been done before. And then finally, world-class value investor, right? Friends with Buffett, friends with Charlie Munger. I think he had dinner with Charlie Munger like every week for a number of years, right up until the pandemic happened. So, and of course, Charlie Munger, a good chunk of Charlie's family wealth is invested with Li Lu. That's kind of one of the 3 places it's invested: Berkshire Hathaway, Costco, and with Li Lu's fund, Himalaya Capital. So I highly recommend, guys, check out this article from Kalani. I'm just going to touch on a few different points here. Right, his parents being intellectuals, they were sent off to labor camps. Da Pa, the illiterate coal miner that took him in at one point, died in a mine explosion when Li Lu was around 7 or 8 years old. And he had to go take his father's job in the coal mine at 15, okay, to make ends meet for the family. Then you've got the earthquake, one of the deadliest earthquakes to ever struck Tangshan. In the morning, 4 a.m. is when it happened, magnitude 7.6. Unfortunately, he wasn't at, that house with the family that he was living with. He was at his parents' flat, which apparently didn't collapse. But the house of this foster family caved in. Okay, there was one individual who was barely alive, ended up dying, and then the eldest son survived, but the lower half of his body was crushed. 3rd deadliest earthquake in China's history. And this is an important point, but the earthquake and its aftermath caused the start of Li Lu's distrust in the Chinese government, a key moment that would snowball. The soldiers and party officials are grabbing all the things available for relief for themselves, or their family. Older people just don't get anything. So I developed a tremendous aversion, hatred towards these people. By the time Lilu was 9, he had lived with 9 different foster families. Okay. So just by 9, I mean, the things he saw are pretty horrific, actually. Then you have Tiananmen Square. Okay. He was one of the leaders of the protests in Tiananmen Square. I'll let you guys read through this if you're interested. But there's actually a movie that was made about this. It's called Moving the Mountain. It's really hard to find, but I actually uploaded it on my YouTube channel, on this channel. If you just search Lilu documentary, you'll be able to find it and watch it. It's an incredible film. And we'll get into it a little bit later, how that film was produced. So he showed up with a pair of underwear in his pocket, right, to this protest, basically from a 1,000-kilometer train ride. The CCP effectively branded the student movement as an anti-party, anti-government revolt. Okay. He married his girlfriend at the protests spontaneously. Talks about the tanks storming Tiananmen Square and Lilu being smuggled out to France. Eventually, Lee made his way to America, and luckily had a place to stay thanks to Mary Daly, who he spoke fondly of. When I first escaped from Tiananmen Square, and everybody was asking me all these deep philosophical questions, like, what's the democratic prospect in China? Mary patiently waited for everyone to quiet down and then asked me, do you have a place to stay? Do you have any other clothes you can change into? And of course, the answer was no to both. So basically, for my first 6 months in America, I stayed in Mary's living room. She was sharing a townhouse with 12 other individuals with a common living room. Okay, so you imagine how comfortable that living situation must have been. But when you contrast it, with what Lilu was able to escape from, and really what Lilu grew up with, probably wasn't too bad, right? It's all about perspective. Lilu had studied for 3.5 years at Nanjing University, but he couldn't get a hold of his old transcripts, right? So he basically had to start college all over again because he had no proof that he actually had 3.5 years of college education. Lilu's grandfather, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, had previously received his PhD from Columbia. So this is something I had no idea about. And while Lilu had never met him, since he died when Lilu was just a year old, it was a massive influence on him. I never met my grandfather. He died in prison when I was just a year old during the Cultural Revolution. But he left behind lots of unpublished manuscripts, and I read them over and over. He was always a hero in my mind as I grew up. That's partly why I chose to come to Columbia. My family has a heritage here. But that heritage is larger than that. It includes a heritage of certain ideals and principles. I feel that my grandfather got them from Columbia, and I have received them both from my grandfather and Columbia. Over the summer, Lilu knew he had to learn English, right? He did not speak English when he got here. So he took this summer program, American language program at Columbia, from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. every day over the summer. He set out to learn English. This is important. New York was totally alien to me. I had never seen or experienced anything like it. The whole experience was quite overwhelming. There are all sorts of freedoms here, but in a way that heightened my sense of guilt. When I first arrived, I hardly spoke any English, and that increased my sense of loneliness and isolation. I was lucky to meet Mary Daly, and through her, Trudy Styler. I think Trudy came round to the house one day, and I was introduced to her, but I had no idea who she was or what she did. I met Sting later, and I had never heard of him. I just thought that they were both very nice and kind. So through Mary Daly, he met Trudy Styler, who at the time was an actress in her own right, but also married to a musician you have heard of called Sting. He has a few decent songs. That's probably an understatement. But Styler became a key role in Lee's life, initially giving him a big bag full of Sting's clothes when he first arrived, helping Lee write his book and visit the publisher in London, then later on buying the film rights to Lee Lu's book and creating the Moving the Mountain documentary. Okay, amazing. So here's a part I might push back a little bit, but there aren't many like this. This is a fantastic article. With royalties from the book, as well as fees earned from giving lectures, he made investments and rode the bull market to the $125,000 he needed to pay his living costs and the tuition not covered by his scholarship. So what I've heard about Lee Lu's early forays into investing is that Lee Lu actually used the student loans that he got to pay for his housing and tuition to invest. Okay, Monish Pabrai talks about this in at least one talk that Pabrai has given, where, you know, basically you can think of the student loans as float, right? Like with an insurance company. And Lee Lu was just able to crush it with that money. I think one of those situations is he found some company in Russia that was like a 4-cent dollar bill, right? You get like 25 times his money in a fairly short period of time. So I would love to dig a little deeper into, you know, Lee Lu's early start in investing and exactly how that played out. I think a lot of the money he made as an investor was from those student loans, not from money that he had earned through various jobs. Which, you know, imagine that, right? Using student loans to invest in the stock market. That's somewhat of a terrifying prospect, but apparently Lee Lu was really able to make that work by just the amount of work he put in to finding these really asymmetric bets that he kind of knew he couldn't lose on. So his investing life. While Lee Lu would eventually grow into a formidable investor in his own right, the beginnings of which involve a good deal of luck and humor. I always had this fear in the back of my mind of how I was going to make a living here. I didn't even think about success at the time. I just wanted to pay my bills. It's a very humble beginnings. I grew up in communist China and never had much money to my name. And then all of a sudden, I had giant student loans. So naturally, I tried to make a buck or two. One day, about 2 years after I arrived, a friend of mine who knew my issues said, "If you really want to make money, you have to listen to this fellow. He truly knows how to make money." I wasn't sure what it was all about. I just remember thinking there was a buffet involved. So I assumed that it was some kind of talk with a free lunch. I said it was a good combination, a free lunch plus a talk about how to make money. So I went. To my dismay, there was no lunch. There was just a guy with the name Buffett. Incredible. But the ideals of value investing really struck a chord with Lee Lu. Mr. Buffett really made a lot of sense during that talk. It was like a punch in my eyes. It was like I had just woken up and a light had switched on. At the time, I couldn't really start companies, and I didn't want to work in a big company because of the differences in language and culture. Investing, on the other hand, sounded like it required a lot of reading and mathematics, hard work, and good judgment. I was confident that I could do those things well. And the fundamental principles of value investing appealed to me. Buy good securities at a bargain price. If you're wrong, you won't lose a lot, but if you're right, you're going to make a lot. It fit my personality and temperament very well. So right out of college, he worked at a law firm, put in 4 months at an investment banking firm, spent 2 years as a corporate finance associate at another investment banking firm. But the work that went with pleasing clients didn't sit well with him. Lilu's savior from the service side came in the form of Rena Shulsky, a Manhattan real estate magnate whom he had met while giving a lecture. It was a red-eye flight from San Francisco to New York in 1997, and she encouraged him to start a fund. I thought he could do better than working at DLJ, she said, and not just advice, she also gave him $2 million in seed money to get him started. What a story. So this really reminds me of Peter Kaufman, right? So much of success in life is luck, but we can have a big influence on luck. If we get out there, we talk to people, we kind of share, what our ambitions are, what our dreams are, we're kind to other people, these kinds of things happen, right? Lilu runs into Rena Shulsky, and the rest is history. I didn't know this either. So his first year going at it alone in his fund, Himalaya Partners, was not a good one. It was 98, and his fund, which was invested chiefly in Asian stocks, was hammered by the Asian debt crisis and lost 19%. Okay, I had no idea. The first year of Lilu's fund, he lost 19%. That just makes me respect him even more. I felt bad that people had trusted me. All they knew was I was a student activist, and all they saw was losses. Julian Robertson took him in, the founder of Tiger Capital Management, but it just wasn't a fit. Robertson insisted that Lilu short stocks, which Lee wasn't too fond of. Shorting was one of the worst mistakes I've made, said Lilu. But Lilu was a natural fit for value investing and going long only given his temperament and thought process, and he explains why he loved investing so much. You prove to them you're good. People trust you. They don't ask how many years I've managed a fund. The question is, can you make me money? Show me the money. This is one area, if you really believe you're smart and you're unique and you're different, this can be challenging. This is it. Because if you're right, you make a lot. If you're wrong, you lose a bundle. Talks about how he started his relationship with Charlie Munger through Jane Olson, the wife of Ron Olson, a Berkshire director and early partner with Munger's, maybe that was Munger's early investment fund. Munger's thoughts on Lilu are incredibly complimentary, but I don't think his actions say more than his words. The sole outsider in Charlie's life who he has invested with. Lilu's been back to China, right? Which I'm very curious. What is this dynamic right now with the Chinese Communist Party and Lilu after, Lilu was on the most wanted list from these student protesters. It seems Lilu is able to travel within China on a limited basis, and he's hoping to regain his full travel privileges in the future. Shows a picture here with Gates, Buffett, and Munger. What does Lilu think of those that accuse him of abandoning his cause and really trying to change, the Chinese Communist Party and the freedoms that he fought for as a student? I need a profession because I think you can't be just a professional dissident, is Lilu's response to that. And here's a picture of him in those protest days. We'll finish with a Lilu quote from his reflections on reaching 50. Woody Allen is right. 90% of success is to show up. At various stages in my life, I could have stopped or took the long rest. For some reason, my heart told me otherwise. I just kept going. Half of the time, I wasn't sure where I was heading. The other half, I was probably taking the wrong turns. No matter. Incredible. So this is Li Lu, guys. One of the investors I respect the most, and really one of the humans that I respect the most, just to know where he's come from, what he's pushed through in his life. I mean, if you imagine going through the same things that Li Lu went through as a child, I would think many humans would just be broken, right? A bum on the street, just, angry with the world. But somehow Li Lu has been able to rise up through all of that and create an incredible life for himself. So hope you enjoyed this, guys. Big shout out to Kalani Scarrott. Follow him on Twitter if you haven't already. Subscribe to his Substack. Big shout out. So with that, I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.